Okay, with Module 4, what we're addressing is the post-assessment process. All right. In this module, we're going to address two primary things that are still part of the methodology, and then I'm going to address the actual IATRP program, which is the InfoSec Assurance Training and Rating Program. Really, the post-assessment is where you're doing your final analysis and your final report. Okay. It sounds fairly simple, but it's actually quite involved because you've got to do your, bring in your technical experience, your InfoSec experience into the analysis process and make good recommendations for your customer to improve their security posture. Okay. Here's where we are in the timeline. Post-assessment is the analysis and report generation. We're going to talk about possibly bringing in additional documentation, additional expertise, and some report coordination. Additional review of documentation. You will get documentation throughout the entire IAM process, throughout the entire assessment. Okay? From the time you start in the pre-assessment process until you're even back home doing analysis, there will still be some documentation potentially floating in. Because part of the questions that you ask during your on-site portion is, what do you use to guide you to do your job? Well, the answer may be, I have this particular SOP, or this particular policy, or this particular email that was sent by management. And you say, well, hey, can I get a copy of that? And they'll say, sure. And of course, you've left the site and still haven't received that copy. And so you may get some of that stuff after you leave that site. Okay, so some of that documentation will be rolling in. You take a look at it, make sure it doesn't conflict with anything else that you already have or think you know. If it creates new questions, it's worth a phone call. And you can follow up with some phone calls for different people to get some clarification on issues. You don't necessarily have to fly back out to the site just to ask a question. All right. But just know you'll get additional documentation. We've even received additional documentation after we've delivered the final report. It just happens. Okay. Additional expertise. Once you get home and are doing your analysis, you may realize there's potential you need some additional expertise to put together a certain recommendation or to analyze a particular portion of the information you found. Okay? And just know you may have to bring in that help to finalize the final report and get that information together. Okay? You don't have to do it in a vacuum. You can bring in help. The final report itself, it expands on the outbriefing information. Okay? We're still working on the concept of no surprises. If you are working on your analysis for the final report and again you run across something new that is potentially detrimental to the organization, that's worth a phone call to the customer rep. You don't have to wait till the final report's delivered. So please remember, no surprises. Okay. The outbriefing provided a high-level view of some of the things that you found. There's going to be a lot more detail in the final report. Obviously, it provides recommendations and options, and it has to be delivered in a reasonable time frame. It says 2 to 8 weeks. Realistically, 8 weeks is probably too long. We typically try to deliver ours in 2 to 3 weeks. We may say 3 weeks and deliver in 2 and everybody's happy. Because if you say 2 weeks and you deliver in 3, then you haven't met expectations. So just build in enough time to do a quality job on the report as you're scheduling when the customer can expect that. Okay? How the final report gets structured, you have flexibility there. There is in Appendix H, there is an example of, or basically an outline for a final report. Okay? Some of the essential things that you need in there, an executive summary. All right, what does executive summaries do?
Summarize the whole report.
It kind of gives a quick summary of everything that happened from an executive's view, right? It's a 1 to 2 page tear-off that they can take on the plane and review what has gone on and what some of the major concerns and considerations are, okay? So you're going to have brief statements about the organization and their mission. Why was the assessment done to begin with? A description of the critical information, critical systems involved, and any major findings and recommendations. And the ones that we include in the executive summary are generally the high-level ones saying, okay, here's a systemic issue you have across your organization. And if you make improvements in this particular area, then you will increase your security posture because it addresses the concern across the whole area. And if there's some positive things, be sure to include that in there as well. Okay? The final report has the ability to say where things are done well. All findings do not have to be negative. Just remember that. All findings do not have to be negative. Point out where they do positive things. Okay, in the body of the actual report, again, these are just kind of minimum essential types of things. The introduction section includes the background information, the organization's mission, why you're there to do the assessment, what was the information criticality, and the definitions that went behind that. What is the system criticality? What were the customer concerns expressed to you as part of this? Okay. Then you have a system description section. In this section, you're going to include a lot of the information you just showed me in your assessment plans. Okay? Because a lot of this stuff you've already got. It's a cut and paste back into the final report, maybe with a little better explanation around it, because it is going to be a permanent record of the actual assessment. So what are the network components? How's the connectivity configured? How many users? Any operational schedules that significantly impact the system itself. Diagrams are still worth 1,000 words. Use network diagrams where you can. Then the analysis portion, this is where you're listing the actual findings. Okay? Along with the actual findings, you want to make sure there's discussion as to how does that finding impact this organization. All that work we did on information criticality, coming up with the highs, mediums, and lows definition, you can say this finding affects the confidentiality of a particular portion of the organization. Okay, so you use that information that you've gained to give a good description to the customer. And then, of course, your recommendations, give multiple recommendations where you can, where it makes sense, so they have options. How you actually organize this, you have some flexibility. Make sure you come to agreement with the customer. Sometimes they'll want it organized based on system. Sometimes they'll want it organized, just give me my highs, mediums, and lows for the entire organization. What we typically do is high, mediums, and lows, and then we'll list the topic areas they're associated with, because remember we said some of the topic areas may cross over each other. So this particular finding, it's a high impact to the organization, and the topic areas are communication security and labeling. This is how it impacts your organization, and these are the recommendations we have to improve it. Okay. But again, you have some flexibility there. Conclusion, basically you're trying to give a description of what is the InfoSec posture of the organization. It's not necessarily an A, B, C, D, or F. You have to understand with the customer what is it they're looking for in terms of a statement. Because you want to be careful and try to manage the expectation of the customers to what they're looking for there. You really can't compare two organizations to each other unless they're exactly alike, and how many of those exist. There's not many that are exactly alike. So it's going to be your security posture is sufficient to meet the regulations that you fall under, including HIPAA, blah, blah, is a possible statement. You might want to work with your own legal department to determine what statements are appropriate, because there is legal precedence for some statements that go along with this. Lawyers always get involved in everything, right? Some way or form. Recognize good security practices where you can. Okay? Any positive things you can point out are always useful. Okay, in the cover letter, okay, this is basically what is your deliverable process. So most of the time there's some kind of cover letter that the customer signs off on saying they've received the final report, and it's a record that they actually received it. Okay, so whatever your deliverable process is, make sure there's points of contact there, though, so that if there's questions, it can be followed up on. Attach the last assessment plan to the final report as a full record of the assessment. It was what was agreed to be done, and it's a record of what was done in the final report. Remember, there may have been some changes to the assessment plan as you move through the process. Okay? You may have ended up changing some of your information criticality or system criticality, because change will happen, and just make sure you get the final one attached to the final report, the one that you actually worked from. Okay, so this is where we've kind of been, all right? This is a summary of the IAM process. The level 1, this is a cooperative, high-level overview of an organization's security posture. It's not hands-on testing. We're looking at their mission, their critical information, their critical systems, policies, procedures, information flow, communication flow, how they're organized, etc. We have 3 phases in our flexible methodology. The pre-assessment phase is where we focus on scoping the effort, understanding the customer, understanding their information criticality and system criticality, understanding what concerns and constraints we have to deal with while we're doing the actual assessment. And then we're documenting all this information in our assessment plan. Okay? And that assessment plan is used in all 3 phases. The on-site activities phase is where we gather the majority of our information about the actual InfoSec posture of the organization. So we gather that information through interviews, documentation review, system demonstrations, and really another one, which is observation. Okay? So you use observation to collect information as well. In 18 baseline InfoSec classes and categories, we introduce those. Those are a good way to organize your question sets as you go in to talk to the customer to gain this information. All right? And can you add to that list? Yes, you can add to the list. Can you take away from that list if the customer requests it? And what do you need to do? Document it. Exactly. We in-brief and we out-brief to manage customer expectations, right? And also to keep everybody on the same sheet of music, introduce new players, and address that wonderful thing called change. Because change will occur throughout any of these activities. And then, of course, the post-assessment is where you're focused on doing your final analysis and putting together the final report. And the final report is our final deliverable with the assessment plan attached. Okay? And of course, if the 3 bears had done their IAM, Goldilocks would never have got in and got in their porch. So it's funny, trust me. Do you have any questions specifically on this? Okay, we still have just a few more slides that goes over the IATRP program. All right, so if nobody has any specific questions on the IAM, you can relax now. The rest of this is not testable. Okay, there's this thing called the Level 1 Plus. All right, Level 1 we know of as our assessments, that's our IAM. Level 2 we know of as our evaluations, that's the IEM. Well, we talked about those high assurance components, the routers and firewalls and the things that probably need a little bit more analysis than we can give in an IAM to determine if they're doing the right thing. Well, this Level 1 Plus provides you the opportunity to do that. It's an IAM with some evaluation things added to address those high assurance components. Okay, so you can do some scans and various other things to collect information on those. So that's what a Level 1 Plus is. Okay, so how did all this stuff come about to begin with? All right, well, NSA has a responsibility and somewhat of a mandate to provide security information and support to the United States of America. They are our national security agency, now that they're allowed to exist in the world, right? Well, they have limited resources too. They don't have unlimited pots of money and access to every place they need to go. So what they do is they leverage relationships with organizations through cooperative research and development agreements. Okay? This is a type of agreement where NSA basically gives the authorization for an organization like Security Horizon to teach or provide information or to do certain things, certain processes and methodologies that are theirs, and the NSA doesn't have to pay us anything. It's the students that come into the courses that pay us to actually support the program. So there's no money exchange in those cooperative research and development agreements. It's just an authorization. Okay? Well, they do this with the IATRP program, they do this with the IAM and the IEM, and they also do it with an appraisal process, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So there's cooperative research and development agreements with all three of those. Okay, so the goals of the InfoSec Assurance Training and Rating Program is to provide a standardized process for doing InfoSec assessments. Okay? And we're talking with the IAM, an organizational level assessment. With the IEM, it's the technical piece. And if you put the two together, you've got basically a full security posture review. But it's a standardized process. The second piece of this is to provide information to consumers of those types of services. So the people that want assessments and evaluations done, they get that information as to what they should look for in their provider. Okay, so that's an education piece that NSA provides with this as well. Okay, so this should look familiar to you. We have our IAM, our assessment process, so we won't beat that up. But really what it's doing is it's taking critical information and understanding of the customer, and understanding of the impact to the customer, addressing 18 different areas or whatever number we ultimately end up with, and providing that information back to the customer so that they can make improvements based on those recommendations to improve their overall security posture. And there is somewhat of a life cycle involved here. It's not a one-shot deal. Security is something that takes repetition, something that has to be part of the culture, not just a one-shot deal. Okay? So that's that part of the process. And these are some of the different things that you did as part of the IAM. Okay, so how do you get training? The IATRP program has two pieces to it, IAM and IEM. All right, both of those are two-day instructional classes, which that's what you've been here yesterday and today, right? There is instruction and there are group exercises in both of those. The certification class requires you to have a minimum level of experience in order to receive the certification. That's that 5 years of experience that you need in order to be eligible for certification. You have to complete attendance, you have to pass the written exam, and you paid in some way, shape, or form to be here, right? The classes are open to anybody, but only those that qualify under NSA's rules can receive the certification. The reason that NSA requires you to have that minimum 5 years of experience to receive the certification, it's a lawyer thing, is the biggest thing. They cannot guarantee that you know what you're doing. Okay, we're not teaching InfoSec, we're teaching you a framework, a methodology. So by having at least 5 years of demonstrated experience through the application forms that you filled out, you're showing that you at least have some background in some way, shape, or form in this arena. Okay? There will be a disclaimer on your certificate for the two of you that, or three of you that are getting the IAM certification. It says that, basically in essence, I don't know the exact words, but in essence, NSA doesn't guarantee you know what you're doing. We're only saying that you understand the methodology. Okay? And that's a disclaimer they put on the bottom. You do, as part of the certification, you do get your name placed up on the IATRP.com website as an IAM certified individual. And people can go and look there. If you need confirmation that you are certified, they can go and look there. Plus you'll have your certificate from NSA when that time comes. All right. The other part of this is government-sponsored classes. Government teaches internal classes. They're not certification courses. So we actually get quite a few government people that come back through ours so they can get the certification, because when NSA teaches, they don't give certifications. Those are free of charge, but you have to be invited in by government folks to do those. Okay. And primarily this is provided as education for the types of things to look for in assessment providers, because the government is a big consumer of assessments as well. Okay, the IAM and the IEM, over the last few years, Security Horizon alone has taught over 4,000 people since February of 2002 when we were first authorized to teach the IAM. And it's been taught nationally and internationally. There are, based on an agreement that was signed earlier this year, there are now 5 or 6 different countries that can now, if you're citizens of those countries, in addition to the U.S., you can actually receive certification too. And it's an agreement, it's an international InfoSec agreement that has been worked out. So like Japan, Australia, Canada, England, UK is one of those as well. Yeah, so or places like that are signing up to try to support international security, and NSA has approved citizens of those countries to get certified as well. But they have to meet the 5 years of experience requirement also. It has been recognized as a standard methodology in multiple organizations, including Lockheed Martin, several government-specific locations in the Air Force and the Marine Corps are using them. We have trained the Army Reserves nationally, the ones that do the InfoSec monitoring. They have been trained nationally on the methodologies. It's being integrated into curriculums at a couple of different schools now. And it's part of some different certification books as information as part of those, like the CISSP exam prep. It's been recognized by ISC Squared as a legitimate certification. The training, if you're CISSP, the training can be submitted to as part of your annual training requirements for your points also. Okay. It is a value-added certification in multiple agencies. Okay. And it's actually becoming a requirement in some contracts as well. It's saying you need to have people that are IAM certified. Okay. It's also part of the National Defense University's CIO program. Okay. And they work with us on some cases where the students are doing research. They'll call us and ask us some questions and those types of things. It's also part of some of the exam prep books. It's also showed up in some other interesting places, unauthorized. Anybody read Korean? The other side of this, that was the training side of it. Right here, this is the appraisal side. And you've probably heard of the Software Engineering Institute Capability Maturity Model. That's one of the most prevalent ones out there, SEI CMM. Another one is the SSE CMM, which is the System Security Engineering Capability Maturity Model. Well, we have our own in InfoSec called the IA-CMM, the InfoSec Assurance Capability Maturity Model, which actually grew up out of the SSE CMM. Okay. The SSE CMM is focused on system security engineering. The IA-CMM is focused on organizations that provide assessment and evaluation services. Okay. So if you're a company, I'm just going to say, let's say you're, well, we can use Lockheed. Or, yeah, let's use Lockheed. Lockheed obviously provides assessments and evaluations to some of their customers, right? So they can get an IA-CMM rating based on the maturity of their processes in providing that to their customers. So it's not a rating of customers, it's a rating of the service provider. Okay. So customers don't get rated under that, the service providers do. But it's a standardized rating for organizations that do assessments and evaluations. If you're familiar at all with the CMMs, you can get ratings from 0 to 5 based on how mature you are in doing those. Zeros, ones, and twos are fairly common. 3, you actually have to have things fairly well organized to get there. 4s and 5s are fairly difficult to get. If you look at any of the CMMs, the SEI CMM, I think there's only 5 organizations that have ever been rated as a 5 under the SEI. One of those was actually, it's no longer Motorola, they got bought out, but it was that part of the organization, used to be out of Scottsdale here. They got a 5 in one of their areas, and then the other 4 are in a wonderful country called India. Okay, because India does a lot of software development, and so they've received ratings from there. There are no level 5s in the IA-CMM, however there is one organization that nailed most of the 9 areas at 4s, and that was recent. There are 9 process areas that are evaluated as part of the IACMM. I'll let you read those. You can download a current copy of the IACMM if you're interested off of the IATRP.com website, which will come up in just a second. You receive 9 separate ratings as part of this process. Okay, you don't receive one roll-up rating. You receive 9 separate ratings. And that's because they didn't want to water down any particular area. So for example, if your organization is a threat assessment company, okay, and all you do is threat assessments, you're probably going to do, or could do fairly well in threat assessment, assess threat, but your assess impact, assess InfoSec risk, and all these other ones could be fairly low. Well, if you're a customer going out looking for an organization that assesses threat, that's the one they're going to highlight, is right there. So it's not a roll-up rating, it's 9 separate ratings. Okay, there were 2 versions that were out there coming up real fast. Anybody that was rated under the old version 2 has to either have had a new rating or be scheduled to receive a new rating in the very near future, or their rating will drop off. Okay, so these are about to expire. You can see some of the names up here. These are the ones that are rated under the new program. And INS is the ones that actually got the near level 4. They got level 4 in 8 of the 9 areas. Okay, so they were doing fairly well. All this information can be found at the IATRP.com website. Okay, includes InfoSec assessment evaluation information, IAM and IEM modules, the IAM and IEM class schedules that are publicly available. You can download the current version of the IACMM. You can look at the list of trained providers as part of this for IAM and IEM. And let's see, and their profiles are up there as well. So if you're interested in seeing how the other ones did, you can do that also. All right. The next part of this logical process is the evaluation side. Okay, that's the level 2. And IAM certification is a prerequisite for IEM certification. The IEM focuses on the technical stuff. Okay, that's the hands-on, running scans, those types of things. But all that information we gain from the IAM, all the scoping information, all the information criticality, critical systems, ties directly into what you do in the IEM, because you're going to focus around your critical systems in doing your technical evaluations. And also the reporting mechanism out of the IEM ties the impact identified in the IAM directly back into the whole picture. So realistically, to give a complete security review, you're going to want both the organizational and the technical aspects of the process. So the IAM and the IEM together are going to make the most sense for organizations to do. Okay. They can be done separately, and they often are, but together they give us the best big picture. And really what you're doing in the front end, you're doing some pre-analysis. Okay, so pre-assessment or pre-evaluation is really pre-analysis. It's scoping, understanding the customer, concerns, constraints, all that stuff goes up front, and also your plan of attack, whether it's your assessment plan or your technical evaluation plan. Then you get into the actual analysis by gathering information. Okay, sometimes we do all this up front, and then we do what I call assess by day, evaluate by night. Okay, because you have concern about impact issues. So we do a lot of interviews during the day if we're doing a combined, and then we might run scans and things like that on off hours to avoid impacting their network, depending on what their operations is like. But there are kind of 2 different functions, and the skill sets required for these 2 areas might be slightly different also. And then you bring it all back together into a full big picture. Okay, that's your final analysis. Okay. And that's it. Everybody shake off the brrr. And so what we can do is, when you're ready with your 3 pieces of paper, well, the 3 of you that have 3 pieces of paper, I'll give you the test. Open book, open notes, just not open neighbor. And then The evaluation, the address form, that's for everybody, and then the other 3 have the authorization form.